Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I will tell you, it does not take long to spend the night in Branson. But it was a good night. I am an alcoholic. My name is Gary Kincaid. And I am really, really, really grateful for a sobriety date and for a new life. Mine started July 25th of '94 in Odessa in West Texas. Today I live in a little town east of Dallas, Sulphur Springs, which anytime I get a chance to throw in my granddaughter, I might talk about Sulphur Springs a little bit. Someone asked me what we were going to do today, and I told them, I really don't know. We'll find out. I've got a few things to start with. First of all, I need two people with a big mouth and a big book. Okay, there's one volunteer. Who's the other one?
Donna.
Big mouth and a big book. This is really the point of what I'll be sharing on this morning. So first, who were the, besides Bobby, who is it?
Donna.
Okay, Donna.
I've been voted.
Page 112. Hold your finger on it. Page 32. And hold your finger on it. No, Donna, you can only do one at a time. You just stay on 112. Alcoholics are not real good at multitasking sometimes.
Yeah.
So just one thing at a time.
3 words.
Okay, the first 3 words on 112.
Oh, reading this book or
No, first 3 words.
read this book.
Louder.
Read this book.
Okay,
More than once.
page 32, first 3 words is more than once. So that's what I'm here to suggest. Read this book more than once. It's been my experience that the most underutilized resource we have in AA is the big book. It's amazing how many other books alcoholics will buy and read. I love the way Hazelton does it. They interview us and take now what we say and put it in a book, and then we go buy their book
Yeah.
rather than being in our book. For new people, the program of recovery is in the book. This is the fellowship, and they're separate things. It's very, 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 very difficult for people to find, maintain recovery simply by going to meetings. It's been my experience. It's been the experience of AA throughout our 88 years. Bill and Bob, 88 years ago this week, were working with their 4th person. And the first one they worked with didn't stay sober, Ernie. He did hang around AA a little bit. He ended up marrying Dr. Bob's daughter, which did not please Dr. Bob all that much. And he later on ended up getting sober and staying sober. But if you will hear people talk about the old days of AA, we need to go back to the old days. Well, keep in mind that very few people got and stayed sober in the first 4 years. The big book was published, I believe, April 12th of 1939. And from all the research that I've done, there may have been 80 people sober. 1 year after the publication, there were 1,200. The next year, there were 8,000. And so it wasn't until 1940 and on that people began to use the book to get sober with, because there weren't meetings. I met a man in Kermit, Texas. When I came in, he gave his dry date as June the 26th, 1947. And I paid attention to that, and I got to know Clinton later. And his story was that his wife in 1942 saw an old copy of the Post magazine where AA was first, I guess, announced to the nation. She sent in $3.50, and that was a lot of money then. It'd be like $40 today. Because she thought her husband needed to find some way to not drink. And the way Clinton tells the story, said he came home, she showed him the book, and he said, "I'm not proud of this, but I beat her. How dare you do? I don't need any help, and you're wasting our money." And he said, "I beat her." In June of 1947, he came in off of a drunk. Nearly 6 years later, and asked his wife, "Do you still have that book?" And he walked off around his living room in his backyard, his drunk, to sober up. She read the book to him, and as it came time to do something, they did it. When it came time to do an inventory, he wrote it out and did his fifth step with his wife. I don't know that I would suggest that today, but nonetheless, it worked. And he got over into the end of the book where it talks about you'll not be able to perhaps meet some of us, but maybe so you can create the fellowship you crave. And the chapter Working with Others gives some real directions on that. He got a hold of one of his best drinking buddies, 12-stepped him. He came over to their house, and his wife read the book to both of them. They got a third one. Clinton died with 54 years sober. The other two had 30 plus and 40 plus. And they started the second meeting in West Texas, in a little town called Kermit. And what I'm sharing is the power of the program as it's found in this simple book. And that's a little bit what we're going to share about today. First of all, context is king in the big book. I find it's not very helpful to just pull out different readings and make those into a program. Everything builds on what comes before it. In the beginning, the steps are linear, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. After a while, they become circular. And after a while, they become one program, one design. People will ask me what step I'm on, and for the last 15 years or so, I'll tell them I'm not on any of them. I'm on all of them. And that'll be a little bit of what we'll share. But I want to get one thing out of the way that seems to bother a lot of people, particularly new people. I believe it's page 20. Find my glasses here. My first sponsor took me to this fairly often. No, it's page 18. An illness of this sort. And Bill's going to do a lot of describing the illness. I would remind you that in AA, we never declare ourselves to be experts on alcoholism. What we are is experts on alcoholics. And there's a big difference. Bill never uses the word disease, and he writes about that. That was very purposeful. He said, I'll leave that up to the medical community. So an illness of this sort, and we've come to believe it is an illness. One of the hardest surrenders I ever had to do was to accept the fact that I was sick. I'd pretty much bought into being sorry. I'm to find out pretty quick I was sick and I was sorry. We used to say in West Texas, if you sober up a drunk horse thief, all you've got is a sober horse thief. If their life's going to change, they're going to have to do a few things besides not drinking. An illness of this sort involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him. No one is angry or hurt, but not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all those lives that touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of of blameless children, sad wives, husbands, parents. Anyone can increase the list. I got introduced to that for two reasons, with a sponsor that said, Gary, until you get sick, you're never going to get well. As long as you believe that alcoholism is a sin, weak character, as long as you believe there's someone to blame for it, you're never going to get well. And getting sick was one of the most difficult things I've done in recovery, to begin to understand that. He used this paragraph with me to say, you're not a victim. Victims do not get recovery. Read the paragraph again, Gary. There's a lot of victims of your alcoholism, but you're not one of them. And he's going to go on later and say, on the next page, first paragraph on page 20, full paragraph, you may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless state of mind, a condition of mind and body. And here's a strange sentence. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? I wasn't asking that. I was asking, why me? I've been in hundreds of meetings where people say, well, I wasn't an alcoholic till my second divorce, and I wasn't an alcoholic till I found out that my dad's not my real dad. You know, they've got all these things going on. So when I do a workshop like this, I like to answer that question first. If you're new and wondering why you're an alcoholic, you can leave today knowing that. How many people in this room have brown eyes? How many have blue? Green? Look around the room. You'll see some of the men have hair and some of them don't. Some of us are 5'6", some are 6'6". You know what that means? That's just the way it is. I'm an alcoholic because that's just the way it is. And I stopped looking for reasons behind that, and we can talk about it till the cows come home. You know, it's genetic, it's this. It's just the way it is. I've got a brother by the same parents. He's not an alcoholic. He's 5'10". Started losing his hair when he was 20. I'm taller than that, and it looks like I'm going to keep my hair a while. That's just the way it is. I've talked to my brother, and he said he's never spent a minute of his life since he became an adult asking the question, why am I not taller? Why don't I? He just accepts the reality of his life and got on with it. Well, I'm an alcoholic because that's just the way it is. Now, what we're going to do early on is to discover the thing that, for me, kept me from getting recovery. Turn to your doctor's opinion. Now, Bill's a good writer. There's a new book out called The Writing of the Big Book. Sometimes I'll hear people say, Bill just sat down, got a pencil, and started writing, and God just led him. I hope some of you get a chance to look at the original manuscript. All of the changes and all of the editing and all the stuff that had to be done. It was a work of labor. If you ever go to Stepping Stones, Bill and Lois's home, you see their library. Over 3,500 different books. And unlike many of us who had libraries, they read those. Very eclectic. Read on everything they could find about this. So in the doctor's opinion, he's a good writer. Read the first paragraph there as I switch to it. I think it's, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader, that's you and me, will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. The doctor is writing what he knows about his opinion, but his opinion he's given here is that as a medical man, there's not been anything that I see that I can do for these people that have this illness. And it's my opinion that if you will try and follow what they've outlined here, there's a recovery to be had. We know Dr. Silkworth saw over 20,000 patients at Towns Hospital and at the hospital he went to after that. He evidently was a pretty wise, caring man. And he noticed that he would get, and Towns Hospital was a high-dollar treatment center, which Bill went to 4 times, by the way. But he noticed, I've got people coming in here, they're female and they're male. They're longshoremen, they're school teachers, they're bankers, they're bums, they're policemen. And the big majority of them, we can detox, give them our lectures, show them what we know about the illness, and give them the only thing that the medical profession has ever been able to give an alcoholic. The good advice of, if I were you, I wouldn't drink anymore. And on the huge majority of his patients at Towns Hospital, they took his advice and they didn't drink anymore. That wasn't my experience, and I bet it wasn't yours. It was my experience, and I bet it was yours, that at various times I tried to slow down. I tried to quit for periods of time. I know many people that made up their mind they're never going to drink again. And they started off on some kind of path that Bill's going to mention on page 45. And don't go there, but when he says lack of power, that was our dilemma. Well, look up the word dilemma, and you find out dilemma is a problem that a person has in which they've been trying to solve that problem. And what usually happens of the alcoholics I've met, nearly all of them in their past, many of them have tried, I'm going back to church. That's what I need to do. I'm moving. I'm getting divorced. Here's one I love today. I'm going to join the gym and get in shape.
Yeah.
I'm going to get if I can stay busy, I won't drink. And what he's saying in the book is, most of us have tried something. And now we're going to try it again, and our dilemma is the only thing we know is what we've tried before, only this time I'm going to try harder what didn't work before. And they end up with, as a line that Bill uses in the book, the most baffling feature of alcoholism is the alcoholic's total inability to leave it alone. Well, I believe he begins to give us some hints in the doctor's opinion. So turn back to that for a moment, and you'll see there's 2 letters there from the doctor. And in between, Bill writes this: the physician who at our request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe. Must believe that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. If you're new, welcome to AA. But that's not a description of alcoholism. If we could interview everybody that's going to drive by on that street in the next couple of hours, we could find that the huge majority of people are pretty much in full flight from reality and maladjusted to life, not just alcoholics. Now, I'm a retired psych therapist. I have met very, 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 very few outright mental defectives in AA. Sorry if you're using that as a reason or an excuse. What I have met, and maybe the exception will be here today, I have never met with one single alcoholic that was not maladjusted to life before they ever had their first drink. Whether they were 9 years old or 40 years old. Maladjusted to life. Just like a great many other people. I call maladjusted spiritually sick. I was already spiritually sick before I had my first drunk at age 19. There's nobody to blame for the maladjustment. True, my dad was an alcoholic. My mother wasn't. Her dad was. She had a sister and a brother that died, one of esophageal collapse, and one died in their own vomit, passed out on the couch. Most of us have generations of alcoholism behind us in our families. None of that creates the physical difference. But it means I'm going to be a little maladjusted life just growing up in that home with two people who loved their kids and were doing the best they could do. What makes me and you an alcoholic is you have to go back to your first real experience with alcohol. And these are never conscious thoughts that any of us have. But after getting into the book and having a sponsor who took me back in my own alcoholism, I made the discovery that for me, on that first night when I got enough to drink to make a difference, it was as if alcohol could reach inside of me, wherever the knob was, and give me the perception of being adjusted. And I've heard enough of your stories to know that for others, there was unimaginable trauma of some kind, and it could reach inside of you and just bring oblivion and not feeling it all. For others, we could dream dreams, but in the beginning, we have to recognize that alcohol did something so much more powerfully for me than it did to me. Why would I not do it again? And that wasn't something I read about, studied about, heard about. It's something I experienced. It's important. Bill's going to use that maladjustment again in the 11th chapter. He's going to talk about it a lot. He kind of tricks you and I in the book. He's going to spend the doctor's opinion in about the first 19 pages convincing me that I have this abnormal body that will always develop a craving for more. And that's not going to change. That gives me an explanation of why I could go out on my children's 11th birthday, and the wife at that time was planning a party for that Saturday afternoon. I'm going to play golf, and she says, be home at 5. I wouldn't miss this for anything. And I made it home Sunday. And when I went to the golf course, I didn't plan on skipping the kid's birthday. But I knew nothing about the fact that once I start to drink, I'm not in charge anymore. And that was helpful to know. I didn't skip their birthday because I'm just a sorry father. I don't care about my kids. I've got an illness. And when I drank alcohol, I did not tell it where I wanted to go. I went where it took me. And that will be a theme of what I want to share with you this morning. When I surrender to the 12 steps, I cannot say I want to use the steps to get me dealing with my anger better or my lust better, to make my marriage right. Just as I could not tell alcohol where I wanted to go, I can't tell recovery where I want to go. I must become willing to surrender to the program of recovery and become willing to go wherever it takes me. And I ain't going to do that until I got in a position where anywhere, anything would be better than what has me now. So you and I are maladjusted to life before we drink. And for me, that's important. I'll hear people still in AA, well, when I was drinking, I was selfish. People, we do not have the illness of alcohol. We have the illness of alcoholism. And there's a big difference. Whether I was drinking or not drinking, I was still an exceedingly self-centered human being looking for the world to revolve around me. I didn't even see that until I got through these steps. You know, it was always my house, my job, my kids. In my marriage, when it came time to make a move, I'm going to make the move because it's my career. And they all just had to follow along. Selfishness and self-centeredness that's the deal of the adjustment, maladjustment. Now you will hear in meetings, things like, I can't drink. Today I choose not to drink. You won't find that in the book. Step one does not mean I cannot drink. Step one means, Gary, you're going to drink again. You're powerless over it without some kind of help. So I've got the doctor's opinion. I've got Bill giving his story. I found my bottom in Bill's story. When I first got here, I would hear people talk about going off the cliff and 7 people in the car were killed and God saved them and they had to go to jail. Some horrific event is a bottom, and I'm thinking, it's not my story. I read that line in Bill's story, the body and mind are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this another 2 years. My bottom wasn't that anything bad happened. My bottom was the time came when every day was the same. I knew when I came to in the morning what the day was going to be. Christmas was no different than a Tuesday in August. It was the same. I could stand the downs and the ups. I could no longer stand it was just the same. And a phrase I would hear that some people would use is the alcohol quit working. Now for me, I don't believe that's the case. We talk about this illness, and remember, until we get sick, we're not going to get well, as a threefold illness. It's physical. It will kill us physically. It's mental. Our thinking is way skewed. And it's spiritual. It's mainly spiritual. That was a new idea to me. I think one of the first benefits I had of being a psychotherapist, which the benefit is not figuring out sobriety, but when I first heard that description, it hit me right away. This is a spiritual illness, not a therapeutic illness. It will not respond to therapy. It must have a spiritual answer. What happens in many of our cases is that we start here. I'm already a little spiritually sick at 19. And remember, it's a progressive illness. So over time, I get more and more and more spiritually sick. At the same time, I'm getting more and more physically sick. And for me, the time came when I became so spiritually sick that even the power of alcohol would no longer touch the emotional pain. I could look up at the pictures of my children, and I got away a long time with being a dad that abandoned his kids. But the time finally arrived when I'm so spiritually sick that I can drink, and it won't take that away anymore. I could look up on the wall and see a photograph of my mom and stepdad who had been killed by a drunk driver 6 years before I got sober. He was colonel in the Air Force. They have that funeral at Fort Sam with hundreds of people there. And Demma's son is so drunk that when they do the 21 gun salute, I fall on the ground, blowing snot and sobbing in a fetal position. And I think, how can you be so sorry as to be drunk at your mother's funeral? And the whiskey wouldn't touch that anymore. Now, each of us has to find our place in our descent to whatever our bottom is going to be. Chuck Chamberlain used to say, we believe alcoholism is a lot like pregnancy. A woman is no more pregnant at 9 months than she is at 9 minutes. It just shows more. And he was using that to illustrate, once you get an understanding that you have this illness, you don't have to ride it all the way to a crashing bottom. And thus, as I mentioned last night, it's not a competition illness. We're not in here trying to find out who the worst drunk was. Have you ever heard of a good one? If you've got it, you've got it. And the recovery is going to be the same. Now go to page 25 for a moment. One of my favorite pages in the book. He's already told us before this that the problem is mainly in our thinking. That was hard to grab a hold of. He says that on page 23, the observations will be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in their mind, not in their body. From that point in the book through the rest of it, Bill's going to be talking more about our minds than he is, he's going to be talking more about that obsession than he is about the physical allergy. He's going to be saying something along the lines of, if you don't find a way to get your mind changed, you'll drink again. Now, I was a pretty brilliant guy by my own assessment. I didn't find a lot of people joining with me on that. But I remember in the beginning thinking, I'm going to learn this stuff. And I'm so smart, if I can hear the right thing and get the right information, I can figure this out. Using my mind to fix my mind is like asking my wife's boyfriend to help with the marriage.
Oh, jeez.
I'm going to get a lot of ideas, but where are those ideas coming from? Right. Me. And when I begin to discover what's on page 25, I've already been sponsored for a couple of weeks, and I start seeing something that Bill never speaks about directly, but he's always talking about indirectly for me. Look at your own experience. But again, I've never met one of us who did not start lying to somebody about our drinking from the first time out. Started lying to someone. And secrets became a part of my life. They already were before then, but they really happened after that. And one thing I've never met one of us that did was ever let anybody in. I was always presenting myself, but I didn't know how to let anybody in to see me for who I really was. Why could I not do that? Because I didn't know. Bill talks about it in the 6th step in the 12 and 12, that we had never given character building a shot at all. And I recognized at that time, I'm the guy who wanted to be thought of as a good person. I just didn't want to do the work to be a good person. But by the time we get here, we've got a part of our life that unless I can allow it to happen, I'm never going to get to stay sober. For me, Bill lays out only 3 areas that our recovery talks about. One is prayer. Every step has prayer with it. And it's not prayer of, God, make this happen. It's the thy will, not mine, be done. Then some of them get very specific. If you've been in here a while and you're still having a lot of family problems, birth family you live with, there's a prayer in the 9th step that it suggests we do every morning. I find very, very few people pray that prayer. Help me show them patience, tolerance. You know, my prayer was always get them to do this for me. But on page 25, he tells us that we're going to be dealing mostly with this thinking that's got to be changed from now on. See the squiggly writing? They were so broke when they wrote the big book. They wanted to use the cheapest paper they could find. That's why it's a big book. But they paid money to have typeset and italics, and it was very expensive. But it must mean pay real close attention to this. Now, I've read the book at least 3 or 4 times. Bill says there is a solution. I never find a second one. There is a solution. Do you remember when you came in, that you may have been as little as I was? It seemed to me that all y'all just love being here. Y'all just laughing and playing. I'm a grateful alcoholic. And I'd say, like hell you are. Not out loud, but I'd say it. Thank God he writes it this way. Almost none of us liked. First words. Almost none of us like. What is it we don't like? It's something that we've never done. Self-searching. I've been doing inventories my entire life of her and him and them. Almost none of us like the self-searching. The leveling of our pride. The confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for successful consummation. Well, what is this self-searching, the leveling of the pride, the confession of the shortcoming? It's a word that's vital to spiritual recovery. It's called transparency. Transparency. I've never been transparent. I've always had secrets. Bill writes, the alcoholic, more than most, leads a double life. I believe if I could got it down to 2, I could have made it. If you're new here, don't fear the transparency. You're already doing it before you get to doing it. When I walked into the room and picked up a desire chip, I was telling y'all more than I knew about me by just getting the chip. The people in the room already knew me better than I knew me when I picked up the chip. When you got a sponsor, you And they don't have to be a good one. They used to say in Odessa, a 5-year-old kid on dope could have run my life better than I did. Get somebody to give you some suggestions. But when you sit down and begin to talk with them, you're becoming a little more transparent. When you start doing that inventory, that's becoming real transparent. When you sit down and do that 5th step, that's even more. And then you go and look in the book at 6 and 7. That's more of that self-searching, and I see those defects that I've been living out of long time before I started drinking. Acting out of fear, acting out of dishonesty, acting out of selfishness, acting out of self-centeredness. Those are my defects. When I sit down and make that 8th step list, I'm finally, that's a hard thing to do in the beginning. I'm in black and white, seeing there are people that I have loved and who have loved me, and I've hurt them. If you're like I am, I believe the one desire that I really had above all others when I got here is I just don't want to hurt people anymore. I was well beyond that. I just don't want to hurt anymore. I came in so full of shame about who I had become. And on a spiritual journey, shame is a different element than it is in a therapeutic recovery. Therapy will say that shame is bad. Recovery says, I would so much rather be full of shame than to be shameless. Because that's that little spark in me that knows that something's got to be done, not with her, not with him, but in here. And when I go out to do those 9th step amends, I'm really being transparent. And it's hard work. And many of us skimp on the sand and the mortar of building because we leave some things off. You got things you're never going to tell anybody? I had a few. And again, thank God for sponsorship that he immediately told me the 2 that he had that he was never going to tell anybody. But it's transparency. And then we get to what people just love to read in meetings, the 9th step promise. I'm a person that doesn't like to read those in meetings. I've been around people that want to work the promises and hope the steps come true.
Yeah.
All of these steps have promises. But remember that dilemma we had on page 45? And it said, we must find a power that will solve our problem. Singular. And we get over to page 85, just 40 short pages of actions. 40 pages of actions that include the first action we take in recovery is getting on our knees and taking the 3rd step. That's an action. 4 is an action. 5 is an action. 6 and 7 are actions. 8 and 9 are actions. And it tells me at the top of page 85, if I've taken these actions, my problem has been removed. Doesn't say it's been solved, it's been removed. And I'm a guy that wants to fix things or solve things. The idea that it's just going to be removed, it says right there, we didn't do anything about it. We just tried following these actions. Well, what happens then is I'm a little bit less, not totally, but I'm a little bit less maladjusted than I was when I started. I've been operating more than I ever have in my life on being honest. I'm operating more than I've ever been in my life on allowing other people to guide me and help me. I do these steps. It's like I said last night, AA's got good news, it's got bad news. And the good news is that it works. The time I finished up my 9th step, it was in my 7th month. Now, I didn't finish all those financial amends, but I'd addressed all of them. It took another 16 years for them all to get paid off. And I'm the kind of guy, and I see it happen all the time in AA. But I got a job, got the old truck fixed, got a decent place to live, got a girlfriend. Out in West Texas, it seems like the key to recovery. Every guy says, as soon as I get a job, a truck, and a girlfriend, I might do the steps. I guess that works for all genders. Little money in my pocket. I've got things to do and places to go now. And thank God for sponsorship that took me right into the 10th step. Because as quick as it comes, it can go. Every gift that God gave me could fit in half a pint of whiskey. And if I get so busy on the things I want to do, it means that I have failed to hear what Bill's going to talk about more than anything else in the big book. Turn to page 14. And before we read that, before we take a lunch break, think about this, folks. Just think about how fragile AA really is. We're only 88 years old. Y'all all know some people that are 88. That's not very long ago. There was nothing available for people like us. Does Missouri have state insane asylums?
Yes.
You know, most state asylums were set up to handle 3 kinds of patients. At the time the book was written, those patients were syphilitics, because there was no cure for syphilis. It's a degenerative brain disease, and eventually all they could do is lock people up and house them. Illnesses like paranoid schizophrenia that they knew nothing to deal with, so they locked them up, and alcoholics. Do you realize that in 1939, when the big book was written, there were still 17 states in the United States doing forcible lobotomies on alcoholics? You ever see the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Jack Nicholson has alcoholism. The treatment for it was just do the lobotomy. There were still 5 states in 1939 that were giving forcible lobotomies to our children. Because if mom's one, the kid's probably going to be one. Let's go ahead and do this and nip the problem in the bud. There's never been a recovery available. And Bill has that 4th trip to Towns Hospital that he didn't pay for any, by the way. And we know that on trips 2 and 3, he met with Dr. Silkworth, and Silkworth had already given him what he called his moral psychology and talked to him about this allergy that Silkworth believed that some people have. But remember, all the doctor had to recommend was absolute abstinence. And Bill was like Read his story. Now that I knew, now that I got this information, I ventured forth for a while, the goose hung high, and then came that day. Self-knowledge, he writes, is going to avail us nothing by itself. And finally, on this fourth trip, we know the story of, in general, of Ebby coming to see Bill. We know that after that, Ebby had planted a seed in Bill's mind. It wasn't immediate. If you read some of the history, our co-founder, Bill Wilson, 2 days after Ebby came, decided he wanted to go down to the mission where Ebby was and see for himself what's going on. Stopped in a bar along the way, met a Swedish fisherman, and they were both drunk and went down to Calvary Chapel. And Bill decided he could do a better job of preaching the sermon than the preacher, and he got up to get behind the podium, and they had to usher him out and call for Ebby before they kicked him out on the street. That's our illustrious co-founder, folks. But finally, Ebby comes to see him when he's in the hospital. And please, new people, read the progression. He said, my friend visited me again. I acquainted him with my difficulties. I saw the people in whom I'm harmed. I made a decision to go set those things right. I made the decision to turn to him who has power over all and to seek his daily guidance. He's doing this in the hospital. We call that taking the steps. And then he had his spiritual experience. He didn't have the spiritual awakening and then take the steps. He did that action and then came the awakening. When you read how it works, the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, not a result, it's the result. We tried to do what? We tried to do what Bill did in the hospital. He said, as I lay there, can you imagine this? As I lay there, I began to think, there must be thousands of suffering alcoholics who would want what's happened to me. I think that's amazing that thought came to him rather than, man, I can't wait to get out of here and go back to work. Now, there's one thing that I doubt in Bill's story, maybe 2 or 3, but it says that his friend brought him the book, The Varieties of Religious Experiences, and he read that when he was in the hospital. Any of y'all read that book? That's a hard read. It's a brilliant book. It's a hard read. But what William James does in that book is he takes about 100 experiences from people of all religions and some of no religion at all. And he writes about their awakening, their spiritual awakening. And he came up with 2 things that all of them have in common. Think about this. One is they never happened when life was going good. I've never met anybody in AA that said, well, the wife and kids, or the husband and kids really love me. I just got a good raise. They made me the man of the year in town, and I thought, it's a good day to go to AA.
Yeah.
It's a bad day when we get here. And James said that was an element that seemed to have to be present for an awakening. And the second thing they all had in common, none of them lasted. Oh, they last for a while. Many of you may have had times of going back to church and getting baptized again and committed to that and feeling real good, and then 2 months, 2 years later, drunk again. None of them lasted unless followed at once by a decision to turn their life in a different direction to be of service. That's what Bill did unthinkingly, and he writes about that, and we'll eat after this. That's why I'm reading this book more than once. I mean, they just keep, how long have you been sober?
God willing, next month it'll be 40 years.
40 years. Have you noticed how many times they've changed the book since you've gotten sober?
I think this is
Well, it's like gremlins come in and change the words.
449. What happened? Pissed me off. Excuse my language.
Here's what Bill says on 14. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They in turn might work with others. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly, was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said. How appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through 2 hours of reading spiritual books every morning and journaling, no, wait, he doesn't say that. To perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others. Immediately. New people, you can be more beneficial to a new person than somebody that's been here for 40 years. You see somebody come in this room or your room and you don't know them, do the thing that probably is the scariest thing you've ever done. Get across the room, greet them, ask their name, give them yours, get a phone number, give them yours, and then say, here, come sit with me. I couldn't talk to old-timers when I got here. I thought they could look right through me because they could look right through me.
Yeah.
But it was Mark and Cran and Corey with 4 months, 7 months, and 9 months who saved my life. Work and self-sacrifice for others. They would not survive the certain trials and low spots which lie ahead. Bill doesn't mince words. Life is going to keep coming at us. Just because we got sober doesn't mean life's going to keep happening. And just because we get sober doesn't mean that every snowball that's already rolling downhill when you get here is not going to keep rolling. The IRS had just put me on their amends list. I hadn't filed for 8 years. Getting sober, they didn't say, oh, Gary, you're in that. Forget that.
Yeah.
All those consequences pay out, and it takes years. Years. But they're not drudgery years. They're years full of hope because you know it's going to happen. If he did not work, he'd surely drink again. If he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it's just like that. Now hear this if you're new. My wife and I abandon ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution to their problem. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half. Here's the guy who in the hospital has this sudden spiritual awakening, but he still can't go back to work for about a year and a half. I was not too well at the time. Physically, people, we've been doing lethal doses of alcohol for recreation. It's going to take a while for the body to heal. And it's not gonna heal very well if I get sober and I can't pass up every donut I run into.
Yeah.
If I don't start taking I believe that God takes care of me. And God expects me to take care of what carries me around. Plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. He's had that experience. For Bill Wilson wrote President Roosevelt letters in his first 2 years of sobriety that if he did it today, he'd be in a federal prison. I mean, he wrote mean, threatening letters because he was pretty sure the reason he couldn't get a job on Wall Street was the president's policies.
I've never heard that. That is crazy.
You know, it's another reason these traditions came about. That's why we leave all that crap out of these rooms. I would hope I go to the point where someday my sponsees will not know what my political beliefs are or religious beliefs or anything else. We don't care in here. But what he said, a trip to the hospital to see a suffering alcoholic would save the day. If you're new, I suggest go at least 2 places every month that you don't want to end up. Just twice a month. Go to a detox. Go to a treatment center. We don't have either of those in Sulphur Springs. I send my newcomers to the nursing home. And have them ask the lady there, do you have any people that are still cognitively able but don't have any visitors? Get out of self and go help somebody else. Bill and Lois, they had such a success story. Right after the big book is published, their house is foreclosed on. They're going to spend 7 months living in tents in Central Park. 4 years of sobriety. Work and self-sacrifice for others. I just find that that's the thing that seems to, the people that come in and start reaching their hand out to help other people tend to stay. The people that get involved and take commitments tend to stay. And I'll end this session with saying it's been my experience, and I love having more time here than I've got. I bet you would agree with this. AA is a really bad place for an alcoholic to visit. This is a move-in program. And if you've been here previously and said AA doesn't work for me, I'm going to suggest that you didn't do the AA work that's in this book. We'll eat and then we'll talk about spiritual hygiene.
You need a bullhorn. Nah, you can hear me just fine.
Okay, y'all about ready?
What's up? Oh, up to it. Maybe, has it always done that? If it started? Let's reopen with a moment of silence, followed by a serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to go.
Okay. If we've gone through the first 9 steps, a great deal of that maladjustment has been identified. Now, it hasn't gone away. Some of it will take years and years if it ever goes away. But when you look in your book, in the doctor's opinion, for me, there are 3 places where Bill talks about symptoms of alcoholism. The first one's in the doctor's opinion, and the symptoms are restless, irritable, and discontented. For me, those are the minor symptoms of alcoholism. And we have a program that if we're doing the work on a daily basis, it'll deal with those. If I stay on too long, they're going to transfer into more acute symptoms that you find in what we call the bedevilments. And this means we're way, way off the beam. And these we had when we got here. We were having trouble with personal relationships. Anybody? That's 52. We couldn't control our emotional natures. I love this one. We were a prey to misery and depression, like it's just swooping down on us like a hawk on a chicken. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. When I'm in the middle of that, I'm really maladjusted. And I'm going back to being a victim again. The most acute symptoms that he gives for me are found on the first page of A Vision for You. And many of us come in with these. I believe all of us come in with the bedevilments. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. The word that Bill uses the most to describe alcoholism in the big book in the 12 and 12 is loneliness. I've never heard a speaker yet that didn't say something along the lines of, when I was a kid, I just felt different. I don't know if every kid might not feel that way. But I know when I drank finally, I liked that feeling. And chased that feeling for a long, long time. This is not conscious stuff. It thickened the loneliness. Thickened. Ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily we did. Then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous four horsemen. Terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. For me, that's the most acute symptoms of the spiritual illness of alcoholism. If I have just tried, and please get out of your mind of doing the steps perfectly. I abandoned my children. And one of the first great gifts this program gave me, when I was 9 years sober, my daughter called and said, the baby's going to be coming in September. Can you wait until I bring the baby home, because I'm going to need someone to stay with me that week and help me with the baby. I mean, I couldn't imagine getting to that point. And some healing had taken place there. Took a long time. But the loneliness was gone. And what could have happened is I could have settled for that. I mean, my God, I put in 9 years. I'm going to meetings. And by the way, it's been well over 27 years since I went to a meeting because I needed a meeting. I was sponsored. You better get that relationship with your higher power. If your rear end's falling off, just drag it to a meeting. There may not be a meeting there. I better find a relationship with a higher power. I was taught you go to meetings not to dump your problems, but to share the solution. You dump your problems on a sponsor. And hopefully you've got one like I've got. I was telling Bobby earlier, my current sponsor very early said, Gary, in AA, we do not laugh with you, we laugh at you. And the sooner you join in the laughter, the quicker you're going to get well.
Yeah.
And I found that to be true. And we, at any stage in sobriety, qualify to be fodder for others to laugh at. That our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. I am more convinced by what's happened since my sobriety date that I'm an alcoholic than I am about stuff that happened before. Because I've done doggone nearly everything that I used to say, well, the alcohol made me do that. And there ain't been no alcohol there.
Yeah.
But I had that little granddaughter. And there is a child in all of your lives. Granddaughter, daughter, niece, friend. When they're about 3 years old, they start coloring. And really, children are selfish little boogers. You know, look at me, you gotta watch. It's me, 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 me. But they do that coloring. And they bring it to us. And what do we usually do with it? Put it on the refrigerator. Not one time in Sydney Grace's life has her mother or her dad or her grandmother or me, nobody's ever said, we ain't putting that up. The colors don't match. You went out of the lines here. Go do it better, and then we take what they bring and we put it on the refrigerator. That's the God y'all have given me. Every effort I make gets put on God's refrigerator. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be right. It has to follow the words that Bill uses most in here about God and us. And those words are seek, sought, try, effort. There's not any straight and narrow and it's got to be done exactly this way. Every effort we make gets put on the refrigerator. So you cannot do it wrong except to not do it. I am a proponent of as quickly as possible. And don't worry about getting it right because we get to do it over and over and over and over and over and over again. Step 3 does not say release from the bondage of self. It says relief. There's a big difference. So this afternoon I wanted to talk about what I call spiritual hygiene. Assuming that I have made the effort and I'm in the middle of the 9th step, There are warnings, starting on page 85. We don't want to rest on our laurels, for alcohol is a subtle foe. And it takes us to step 10, which uses a word that most of us do not need a dictionary for. Continue. Continue to do what? What you just did in 4 through 9. So we're not going to do an inventory and it's done. We'll be doing it the rest of our lives. So we go back to page 25 for a moment. Remember, there is a solution, which almost none of us liked. Let's see the process of this solution. First of all, this is the importance of meetings. And for me, it's the importance of, I don't belong to a meeting, I belong to a group. There's a difference between meeting and a group. But the first thing he says, we saw it really worked in others. So think about your story. I got brought in here, my life is the mess. I really did not believe I could find a way to not drink. And I did not believe I'd ever find a way to make up for all that stuff I'd done. But there were people in those rooms that when they shared in such a way that, and they didn't give long drunk logs. I don't think those are helpful at all, in my opinion. But they shared enough so I could hear, gosh, I was like that. And then they shared the solution and what they were like now. And I came to believe, by watching others in whom something had happened. I tell people, my current sponsor, I got when I was a year sober. One reason I picked him because I'd heard his story, and Steve was as sorry as any human being that ever walked the face of the earth. And he wasn't that way anymore. And that was so apparent. He wasn't that way anymore. Not just in the room, but at the coffee shop, on the softball team, out there. He wasn't one person in here and another person out there. You didn't hear politics talk. You know, if you read the third step, which is pages 60 to 63, I'll tell a little story on that. I couldn't talk when I first got here. I was afraid I was going to say the wrong thing. As y'all can tell, I've gotten over that.
Yeah.
But we had a meeting one day, early, first few weeks. It was on the third step. It came to me, and I decided to talk. And I said, well, what I think the third step, my sponsor leaned over and said, pass.
Yeah.
It felt like he said, you dumb idiot, shut up and pass. You know, I never got talked down to, but I felt that way. And afterwards, I'm looking at him like, he said, Gary, what in the hell do we want to know what you think it means? We've got explicit directions on pages 60 to 63. There's even a line there. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? He said, we don't need your opinion. We've got it right there. The first thing any alcoholic gets back when they get sober is our opinions. If you're like I am, you'll spend the rest of your life tossing them away, one by one. So I came to believe that it worked by seeing it work in y'all. And this is a huge line in our program. And we, that meaning you and I, had come to believe in the hopelessness and the futility of life as we had been living it. I always tell new people, I really hope this is the absolute worst time you've ever experienced in your life. That it's that time that you just come to believe in the hopelessness and futility. And read how he writes it. Not of life. If there had been a period after life, which there is for many people, that would be the ones that take their own life. But he added, as we had been living it. And there was just enough of something left inside me and you to know maybe it's the way I've been living it. Maybe it's not life. When therefore, I'll tell you, when I got here, I didn't believe in God, but I believed in that. When therefore we were approached, there's that word again. The newcomer gets approached by the one in whom the problem has been solved. There was nothing left. Nothing left for us to do. I believe if there had been anything left, I'd have gone and done that first.
Yeah.
Because I went and did a lot of other things before this. There was nothing left. That's why I want to remember that newcomers on that fragile, fragile thread when they get here. Whether they're from Yale or jail, whether they're a down and outer or an up and outer. And they're right there between believing in the hopelessness of life, or is it as we've been living it? There's nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. Well, I'm going to take a chance here. I'm going to tell you that after 28 years and change, no new tools have been laid at my feet that are different than the ones that were laid at my feet when I was about 10 days sober. I bet it's the same with 40 years. It's the same toolkit. I don't need to go looking someplace else for something else until, and I'm not saying there are not members that may not need outside help with some issues. There really are. But not in the place of picking up these tools and taking this program for recovery from alcoholism. And we get these tools, and it says we've found much of heaven and been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. Now, there are all kinds of definitions of that. I'll tell you what mine is, and Bill uses the phrase twice, of the fourth dimension. Albert Einstein was a rock star in 1938. All of the major newspapers had reporters assigned to him. And they were science reporters who could take that stuff and put it in words that everybody could understand. And Bill was a brilliant man. Little of his history. After he got out of the service, Thomas Edison wanted to hire a dozen new helpers. And he advertised in all the major newspapers in the United States, and thousands of people took the test. Bill was offered a position by Thomas Edison. He's a pretty brilliant guy. He makes fun of his violin playing, but it was for acoustics and sound. You know, Edison is doing the phonograph and all those things. So Bill's a pretty brilliant guy. He writes, he turned it down because he realized he'd never get to be top guy. Edison would get all the credit. I can believe that. But he was interested in Einstein. And Einstein's theory of relativity was explained by the newspapers in this way. Prior to Einstein, there had been 3 dimensions of reality: height, width, and depth. Physical dimensions. And Einstein said there's a 4th. It's called time. And things like months and centuries and days are made up to help humankind put order to their life, but the only reality of time is now. So we get rocketed into a dimension that I had never lived in before AA, and that's now. I'd always been in the past or in the future. I'm daydreaming, I'm planning, I'm plotting. But part of alcoholism is that I've never been comfortable in my own skin, right here, right now, doing what I'm doing with the people I'm doing it with. I'm always looking for something out there, something else. And this spiritual toolkit lets me live now. May you find God now. And Bill used that term quite a bit. That's what it is for me. I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin the majority of the time. I'm as comfortable out there any place in the world as I am here. Now, that didn't happen in the first few years, but it happened. But it goes on. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective, and Bill uses that word effective quite often, spiritual experiences which have revolutionized, now hear this, our whole attitude. As I shared last night, taking those actions with my dad, he never changed. What changed was my attitude. I've always wanted new conditions and new circumstances. God, please change this and that and give me this or that. This program says, you're not going to get new circumstances until you get a new attitude. Towards, read the order. Life itself. Life doesn't suck. Life's not hard in the sense that I made it hard. I get a new attitude towards life. Toward our fellows. That includes my dad, that uncle who abused me, the people I loved, the people I didn't love. It's all of them. Now, it never says we're going to excuse anybody's behavior, but I'm the one that needs the new attitude. They may not get one. And then, towards God. I always felt like I need to get close to God. Here I am and here God is. I want to get there and screw all these people in between. Huh? This is still 25. And in order to do that, I've got to use that simple kit of spiritual tools. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered our heart and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He's commenced to accomplish those things for us which we can never do by ourselves. If you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there's no middle-of-the-road solution. That's what I said. AA is a bad place to visit. And AA is a whole lot more than the meetings. AA is about what happens not between the Serenity Prayer and the Our Father Prayer, but it's what happens between the Our Father Prayer and the next Serenity Prayer. It's living out there in our homes, at jobs, and in the community. It's Walmart, it's the traffic, it's all of that stuff. I'm one of those who copycatted people's words. I was a parrot, and sometimes I think you have to talk the talk before you can walk the walk. But I made the mistake of saying one day in front of my sponsor, well, family and the home is the hardest place to work this program. He said, no, it's not. It's just the last place most of us try. And we pick up on all that. Oh, the family, the family, the family. It's not about them changing. It's about me becoming willing to be changed and have nothing to do with the change. If I have outcomes in mind, I'm doing this so I can, or it ought to be this way. I'm not in the now. I'm in planning an outcome. And this program is going to be pretty direct in 3 through 9, that outcomes are none of my business. I take the action, and the outcome is up to God, however you understand God. But if I'm doing something, and I'm going to be kind and generous to Bobby, and I do something for him that I know he's going to like with the expectation that he's going to give me something back that I want, that ain't love. That's manipulation. Again, Chuck Chamberlain, I highly recommend a new pair of glasses, said, love is not a feeling, it's action. If you love somebody, you do for them. You want a new marriage without getting a new partner, then look at that line early in the book, as ex-problem drinkers. Our thoughts must constantly be of others and how we may help meet their needs. So we give up this idea of it's 50-50. It's 100 to nothing. You'd be amazed. You'll hear people say, you can't change anybody. Well, that's a lie. I can change anybody in this room. I can walk up to Bobby and slap the hell out of him. He's going to come up a changed man. I can go put my arm around him and tell him I really respect and I'm proud to be in a program with you. But that'll change. So my attitude means everything. And I found for me, with this spiritual hygiene, not only did I have to change the words I use about the people in my life, I have to rename them, because people are going to become what I call them. If I continue to call the children's mother that bitch, she's always going to be that bitch. She's never going to be their mother in my eyes. And there will always be conflict. If I am spreading spiritual pollution at the coffee shop or out on the front porch about the president or the next one or the last one and all these laws and all this stuff that's going on, what they are doing, that's just spiritual pollution. We're not saying don't have your viewpoints, but does everybody need to hear them? I'm 76 years old. I have never met a single human being who has had their mind changed about religion or politics from an argument. It is useless pollution in my estimation. So I got to be careful with my words. Words are actions. And so I get cleaned up a little bit. It's like Chamberlain said, I came in here like I'm a cup full of dirty water. And what I want to do is just pour it out and get a new glass. And the spiritual walk says, no, you can't do that. What we do in here is take actions that little by little puts another drop of clean water in, another drop of clean water, another drop of clean water. And over time, the clean water disperses all the dirty water. And one day we wake up and we're a glass full of clean water. But if I don't keep taking the actions, that glass of clean water will grow stale and it'll go bad. So I've taken these first 9 steps, and life's getting better. Now let me ask you this. Did any of you take a bath or a shower in the past 7 days? Even a couple days. We all know the value of cleaning our bodies, right? Does anybody here use deodorant? You ever brush your teeth? Use mouthwash? Carry around gum and mints throughout the day? I've got cans of body spray in the car because we sweat a lot in Texas. If I don't do those physical hygiene things, my life will stink. And with bad breath and bad odor, I'll run people away from me. Well, what about spiritual hygiene? If I don't surrender to taking actions of daily spiritual hygiene, my life will stink. And I'll run people away from me with my attitude and with my words and with, when Bill writes in the 3rd step, selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. He is on the page before that giving us the 2 symptoms of selfish, self-centered people. They are blaming and complaining. Now, I'm probably with the only group of people around Branson that does no blaming or complaining at any given time. And nobody ever hears it. But I got to find a way to not do as much of it. And little by little I get changed. So I finished the steps. I'm on page 85 now. And I just think I finished the steps. What I found out is I'm just starting. On 84, he says, this brings us to step 10, more italics, which suggests there's that word, continue. To take personal inventory. That sounds like a 4th step to me. Continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We're going to make them. That sounds like 8 and 9. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We've entered the world of the Spirit. That's a I love that phrase. It's always been there. I'm just now entering it. And it's big. It's infinite. It is not definable. And I'm new in it. So I'm going to spend some time in that world of the Spirit, staying close to the wall, trying to hold on. It's going to be a while before I'm going to venture too far into this. I might get in trouble. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Of who? You. Not understanding myself, understanding you. And there's that word effectiveness again. This is not an overnight matter. I've got a feeling it still goes on 40 years in. Because I know it still goes on at almost 29 years in. We'll always be doing this stuff. Bill's got another writing where he says, in the beginning we do this because we have to. And then we do it because we need to. And then we do it because we really want to. Well, that's how the progression has been for me. Remember that old deal of how long do I have to go to meetings until you want to? I go to meetings today to meet people who need this program. Now, I can meet them any place. I can meet them at Walmart. But I'm going to have a much better shot at meeting them here. So we come here for what we can give to others. And God's like the biggest loan shark in the history of the world. You can't outgive him. The more you get, the more he gives. And we just got to always be paying him back. We're never going to get even. You know, I should not be allowed in my children's home. I've got keys to both houses today. We don't deserve that. We get that. And I don't tell people that if you do this program, you and your children are going to be reunited. My sponsor has a son that he's never spoken to physically since he got sober because the kid refuses. But Steve is okay with that as you can be. He set up a college fund for a kid that never wanted to talk to him. He found out afterwards that he's got grandchildren. He just switched that fund over to the grandkids. He sends Christmas cards and money to the never gets a word back. You know, I was fortunate because I had some family members that they wanted to walk a spiritual path too, and they were willing. But we can be free of that stuff. You get the idea? We don't make promises there. So, the 10th step is a walking around step. It's not something we do at night. It's a walking around. Like Joe and Charlie said, sadly enough, I just don't get nearly as much trouble in bed at night anymore as I used to. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but that's just a real thing. I need help in the daytime. And if you read the book, it doesn't say if, it says when. We're all going to get angry every day. I'm going to get fearful every day. I want every human emotion there is, because what happens in here is the best we get to be is we become humans. And I want the lust, the joy, every human emotion that we can have. But like it says on page 62, I just never want to be driven by those anymore. Because I can't help but have them. But with God's help, I don't have to be driven by them. And so it tells me in the daytime, I'm walking around, and Bobby has told me he's going to meet me at 11 o'clock and buy me a steak. I'm still sitting in the restaurant at 11:45 and he hadn't showed up. He hadn't called. I start simmering a little bit. Everything I've done for him, and he does this. And I knew I couldn't depend. You know how we can get with stuff like that? Well, it tells me what I'm supposed to do here. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Now, where did we see that earlier? 4 steps. When these crop up, not if, we got 4 actions. We ask God at once to remove them. That's prayer. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. Then, and everybody forgets this one, we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Doesn't even say I got to help them. I got to start thinking about it. That's part of daily spiritual hygiene. Now, what makes that possible over time? Well, 10 and 11 have got to go together or we're in trouble. Bottom of page 85, step 11. Suggest prayer and meditation. I don't know why Bill did it this way, but he does it backwards for most of us. On 86, I'm going to skip the when we retire at night and go right down to on awakening. Did any of y'all wake up this morning? Isn't there a heck of a difference between coming to and awakening? It's a gift in itself. So here's the spiritual hygiene. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. Today, we consider our plans for the day. People, by the time I was 7 or 8 months sober, I had some plans for the day. I had a job I was going to. I had somebody I was dating. I had commitments, and I knew my plans for the day. Before I got to y'all, I didn't know what my plans yesterday were most of the time. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, this is a prayer, this is spiritual hygiene. We ask God to direct our thinking, especially that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God, and ask God as a prayer for inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. And he goes on through the rest of the 11th step. I call that spiritual hygiene. I would no more today think of leaving the house without doing my 11th step in the morning than I would without brushing my teeth and putting on deodorant. And I don't know about y'all, but a morning prayer lasts me usually until I run into another human being.
Sometimes.
Whether I know them or not. It could be on the road or at work or they're in the kitchen. And so I've got to do some things during the day with prayer. That 10th step, just like I do some things with putting in a breath mint or chewing some gum, because I keep that physical hygiene alive throughout the day, I've got to keep the spiritual hygiene alive. Does it make sense? And I wonder why in the hell my life is not going the way I want it to go. and other people aren't acting right, or other people are getting ahead, and I can always look back in my case and see it's because you haven't been doing, you're resting on your laurels. I'm not doing the private recovery. The real recovery in AA is what you and I do when nobody's watching. If a person is serious about 6 and 7, they're going to be doing a step 10 and 11 daily. And you remember I mentioned one of the things that's an element of this alcoholism we have, and that's all those secrets that we had, stuff we didn't want people to know. In the last few years, I've had calls from several men, some of who I've spoken with all across the country, that blew up their lives again. No drinking. 2 of them with internet sexting and texting and getting on sites and doing all kinds of sexual stuff with people on the internet. And one of them with gambling. It started on the internet during COVID. And the result for all of them has been divorces and public shame and all of that. And what I would share with them is what I tell my guys. If I'm sponsoring Dale, I tell Dale, I don't care. In AA, you can sleep with anybody you want to. We don't care. You can gamble. You can do internet relationships. We don't care. We're not here to judge. Just put that computer or telephone out on the kitchen table where everybody walking by can see what you're doing. Because what you're doing is not what's going to kill you. Hiding it. The secret. The stopping the transparency. And becoming alone again. Because I can tell you out of experience, when I've got a secret, keeping that secret is more important than being at one with you or anybody else. And I might be looking good, and I might be sounding good, but I'm right back to just being the way I was before I got here. Just with me. That's a dangerous place to be. I would like to report that I get in as much trouble in some areas today as I used to, and I'm not doing as much of that stuff as I used to do. But I still got a pretty good thinker. I share with my sponsor the things I'm thinking about. Sometime in the last 15 years, I had an affair with a married woman. And I told my sponsor about it before it happened. That for whatever reason it was on. And Steve didn't say, "Don't you do that." He said, "I want you to add a committed meeting. One more, I do 4 committed meetings a week." He said, "You go up to 5, and you find you a newcomer today. Because this thing's damn near going to kill you." I lasted about 6 weeks. I could no longer share in the meetings because I'd be telling a lie. I was afraid of who was going to find out. I began to think, how is, like it says in the sex inventory, who's being hurt? And remember, one of the things that I wanted most when I got here was just not to hurt anybody ever again. And I believe if I had not told him out loud what I was going to do, I believe that would have taken me down. Find somebody that you can be totally transparent with. Because think about it. The stuff in my mind, oh man, it would be so good for her. You know, he's not treating her very well. You can tell she just needs somebody to care and love about her. See, that's my self-talk. The out loud is, she's married, she has 2 kids, blah, you know, you're going to ruin somebody's marriage. It sounds different out loud than it does up in my mind. No person, much less any alcoholic, is capable of an accurate, solitary self-appraisal. I had said earlier, and we just got 2 more things, page 130 is what I'd said earlier, Bobby, that we're going to do this thing on. And I think we have. Not real sure about it. Those of us who have spent much time in the world of spiritual make-believe, and most of us have eventually seen the childishness of it. The dream world has been replaced by a great sense of purpose, accompanied by a growing consciousness of the power of God in our lives. We have come to believe He would like us to keep our heads in the clouds with Him, but that our feet ought to be firmly planted on earth. This is where our fellow travelers are, and that's where our work must be done. These are realities for us. We have found nothing incompatible between a powerful spiritual experience and a life of sane and happy usefulness. Bill has 3, for me, drop the mic moments in the 12 and 12. One of them is on page 80, and the 8th step for all things. 8th step, which I just blew on by for the first few years. Thought it was just a way to get to step 9. But listen to this. While the purpose of making restitution, he's talking about the 9th step, to others is paramount, it is equally necessary that we extricate from an examination of our personal relations every bit of information about ourselves and our fundamental difficulties that we can. And here's the drop tonight. Since defective relations with other human beings have nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes, including our alcoholism. That's a powerful statement. He's talking about that maladjustment. No field of investigation can yield more satisfying and valuable rewards than this. Calm, thoughtful reflection upon personal relations can deepen our insight. We can go far beyond those things which were superficially wrong with us to see the flaws which were basic. Most of which, folks, we had by the time we were 15 years old. As a 15-year-old, somebody could say, why'd you do that? Well, you made me feel. Are you going to, I don't feel like it. You know, a 15-year-old gets to live out their feelings. We call that adolescent behavior. If you're doing it when you're 25, they call most of that criminal behavior and put us in jail. They expect that sometime we're going to grow up and not be reacting and justifying my actions on the basis of, well, he called me a this. You know, I've got to find out. I had most of this stuff before I ever started drinking. It's going to take a while. My estimation is, I'll take Dale. I know Dale pretty well. I think Dale will be fully relieved of every shortcoming he's ever had when he's about 4 days dead. It's going to take that long. So what that means for those of us who are here is there's as much surrender in front of me today as there is for the woman that walked in last night. There will always be the same levels of surrender for each other. And that's a good thing. That's what keeps us identifying with each other and knowing how much we need each other. Now the 11th step, I've only got 2 more of these and we'll finish. And these are around spiritual hygiene. Page 98. Another drop the mic. There is a direct linkage among self-examination, sounds like inventory and talking with somebody, meditation and prayer. Taken separately, these practices can bring much relief and benefit. But when they are logically interwoven, logically related and interwoven, the result is an unshakable foundation for life. That's a pretty strong statement. I didn't realize it. That's what I'd always been looking for, an unshakable foundation. And then a couple pages over, on page 103, he's talking about this 10th step and 11th step, daily spiritual hygiene. He talks about thy will, not mine, or some phrase or particular prayer that appeals to us. Just saying it over and over will often enable us to clear a channel choked up with anger, fear, frustration, or misunderstanding, and permit us to return, now hear this sentence, to the surest help there is of all. Surest. Our search for God's will. It doesn't even say knowing it or finding it. Just our search for it. Do these things. Now, I have never met anybody on the A honor roll in AA. I'll tell you that I shoot for about a C+ on a daily basis. That's a good grade for me. I was a 0 when I got here. C+, and I don't know anybody that does it all perfect. I don't believe I want to be around people that think they do it perfect. C+ is pretty good. But if you go to the last part of the daily hygiene, and that's before retiring at night. People, it's an open book test. You can even cheat on it. Takes about maybe 5 minutes. We review our day. Try to take a look at what we did right and what we did wrong, and how we can do better tomorrow, and making amends if we need to. I've made a lot of 10:30 and 11 o'clock phone calls. A few times I've had to get in my car and go to somebody's house and make a direct. But do y'all remember how it was before you got here? And how it probably was in the first months? Did any of y'all ever wake up in the morning and discover that your mind had woke up about an hour before then, and as soon as you came to, it would say, boy, I'm glad you're finally awake. There's some things we need to be talking about. Yeah, there I'm going. When we retire at night, I know what it means to be retired today. I'm retired. My last day of work, I took all 3 of my license. The last trash can I came to, I tore them up and put them in there. I retired. That's what we do with each day. We just retire it. Get up in the morning and we get the gift of the new day. Hell, if there's no toe tags and no active warrants, we ought to be happy as hell. And it's another day to be of service. So on your own, I'm going to ask you to read what Bill has in the 11th step in the St. Francis prayer. If you can pull it up online, I believe it's Montreal in 1965. And Bill gives his talk that year on the prayer of St. Francis. And one thing he says is, Francis said it more succinctly, more directly, in 2/3 of a page, what I could not write in 164. That prayer is our program. And for y'all allow me to share a little bit of this with you, you know, all I'd really say is read the book more than once. And read it with somebody else, and it's even better. So that's all I've got for this thing. Thank you.